May 11th is World Ego Awareness Day. Ego Awareness Day aims to promote understanding and teach people the signs of ego-driven behaviors. The reason why this is so important is because egotism is real. It is an epidemic that is prevalent through society, affecting millions of people around the world. It is invisible and very difficult to detect. It affects everyone on this planet to some degree. One of the big issues is that there is not enough education and social awareness in helping people get the support from their family and friends, because they do not realize the hidden mind structures that are in place. They have no experience, no training in understanding this mental condition, which has been normalized in the world. Before we can transcend our egoic mind, we should be fully cognizant about what it is. The ego is commonly described in a limited way as having a self-absorbed personality, an inflated self-image with many overbearing characteristics of being selfish, cocky, neurotic, overly ambitious, or competitive to the detriment of others, and a sense of superiority or inferiority. The ego is actually a basic function of the human mind that had developed over the course of human history for the main function of surviving. It's a survival machine embedded in the hard drive of our minds. The word ego is a Greek word that means I, a distinct sense of personhood. A baby is born without a separate sense of self. One could say that a baby is born without a developed ego. It cannot tell the difference between what is the self and not self. Without an ego, a baby has no boundaries. They are naturally innocent, vulnerable, yet interconnected with everything. However, this sense of oneness is short-lived, and by the time a child reaches the age of 2, it starts to develop a conditioned, skin-boundary sense of identity through its name, its personal thoughts, emotions, gender, race, culture, and pre-established rules. This is how our ego develops. It is what we believe to be true about ourselves and how we are perceived in the world. In our first years of life, we begin to form mental images and impressions of who we think we are. A fictional mode of identity based on our personal and cultural conditioning in order to fit in, adapt, and become a certain way. This false facade that we have created in our minds was a defense mechanism to help protect us from re-experiencing the feelings of powerlessness, self-diminishment, developmental trauma, disapproval, vulnerability, inadequacy, and stress in personal relationships. Children during their separation stage of development had unconsciously created this approval-seeking mask because they did not have enough support to become emotionally and psychologically apart from their parental and other authority figures. As we become older, the importance of social acceptance begins to dictate our life choices. When we identify with this mind-made sense of self, we are functioning in ego mode. Our ego is a learned phenomenon, an artificial social construct that is built into the fabric of how we see, think, speak, feel, and behave. One could say that the real cause of most of our delusions and suffering is holding on to false narratives that we are powerless, defective, worthless, limited, and disconnected beings from each other and the universe. To protect our distorted, reinforced self-image, we unconsciously had to adapt to the rules and judgments of our family and society at large by thinking and acting out accepted behaviors that are the exact opposite of what we internalized in order to compensate for our sense of incompleteness or lack. The ego thrives on seeing through the lenses of division, black and white thinking, believing that we must fight for our differences, boundaries, and survival as an individual or as a collective. When we see others as the enemy, we are trapped into a perpetual psychological state of paranoia, defensiveness, vulnerability, anxiety, and fear. Collective egotism is an association or blind allegiance to a group or ideology, whether it be political, tribal, corporate, sports team, military, race, nationality, religion, and so forth. The individual ego attempts to seek escape from the sense of dissatisfaction, powerlessness, incompleteness, and a lack of self-worth by strengthening itself through identification or membership with a group identity or organization. The world is largely a reflection of our internal egoic mode of consciousness. Collective egotism manifests the same fear-dominated traits as individual egotism, such as the need to belong, to be right, while others are wrong, the accumulation of more things, the need for conflict and external enemies, for opposition and competition defines its boundaries. All of this is done with the intent to seek out new things to identify with in order to feel alive, establishing separateness, indifference, self-preservation, and an enhanced sense of worthiness. When people are in the grip of an inherent collective dysfunction, they no longer feel a sense of oneness and equality with humanity. Research has shown that being under the influence of our individual and collective egoic mind patterns can be held responsible for most of our emotional pain and suffering that include self-importance, limiting beliefs, toxic thinking patterns, prejudices, judging others, complaining, exploitation, manipulation, rage, addiction, stress, anxiety disorders, lack of confidence, racism, sexism, environmental pollution, superiority, division, living reactionary, lack of empathy, despair, loneliness, codependent relationships, religious and tribal wars, weapons of mass destruction, and the list goes on. All such negative and destructive traits have serious consequences in our society and the world at large. We then protect and preserve this individual and collective self-identity at all costs, becoming exclusive rather than all-inclusive. If you ask people the fundamental question, who are you? You might commonly hear responses like, I am my gender, race, academic status, characteristics, pre-established roles, religious or political allegiance, and other labels might come into the picture. These are all traits that have been modified by our egocentric society. The ego is strengthened when we begin to identify and react from the small, polarized voice in our heads that pretends to be us, constantly creating boundaries to enforce our sense of separation. In this way, we guard ourselves from perceived threats from the outside world, even when they don't exist. Most of our ego drives are rooted in whatever supports its own sense of safety. This creates unnecessary emotional drama and struggles in our lives, feeding us false messages that we are not enough as we are, not attractive enough, not smart enough, not good enough, not successful enough, or rich enough, not competent enough, and so on. So we adopt those limiting, fear-based beliefs, and we train our egos to validate, obsess, and reinforce them with strong conviction. This leads us to constantly look out for our own best interests, which in turn gives rise to conflict, the need to be right, accumulating more things, to dominate, control, and the necessity for external validation and recognition. The content of the egoic mind varies from person to person on the surface level, but deep down it operates from the same unstable mind structures built on fear, survival, tribalism, conflict, and isolation. We cannot get rid of our egos. The development of our ego is an integral part of human life. It is the human condition. It's a necessary function to establish goals, healthy boundaries, and ensure our survival, our self-protection in the world. The problem is not that we have an ego. It is allowing the negative, unchecked parts of our ego to control our perceived reality, protect our erroneous belief systems through psychological defense mechanisms, and run our lives. Identification with the compulsive mental noise of our egoic mind is a terrible affliction that almost everyone suffers from, so it is considered, for the most part, normal. Holding on to these negative thought patterns that create a false, mind-made sense of self prevents us from connecting to a deeper place of stillness, joy, and peace rooted in the depth of our being. To transcend the prison of our egoic programming is to be aware of how it hides behind the idea of I, me, mine paradigm, believing that I am what I do, I am what I have, I am what I want, I am my past, I am my roles. This functions inside us without ever being detected, so that we can remove our personal identification and attachment with it. The surest way to work for the betterment of the world is to be increasingly aware, mentally stable, and emotionally balanced. This will prepare you to become more skilled at finding your niche for communication, at delivering the tools of inner transformation to others according to the level of understanding. The problem of the ego running our lives is the root cause of human suffering and the fate of the planet that we live in. It is reaching epidemic proportions. We live in a highly egoic culture that encourages people to indulge in individualism, to focus only on our differences. On May 11th of each year, we observe and celebrate World Ego Awareness Day. We ask for your participation in this growing global movement to increase social awareness about the ego. While we hope that people will educate themselves and others about the ego throughout the year, this dedicated day gives us the opportunity to collaborate and amplify each other's understanding. The Ego Awareness Movement was established in 2018 to support all those that are affected with this mental condition and work towards preventing others from experiencing the effects of this invisible form of abuse. Through education and advocacy, we can help reduce the number of people throughout the world who fall victim to egotism, to increase their ability to be centered in the present moment and experience life to the fullest. Ego Awareness Day aims to highlight the issues surrounding egotism, encouraging everyone to be more mindful, raise our consciousness, and speak out against narcissistic or egotistical learned behavior. Together we can work to inform, educate, deter, and prevent one of the major causes of human suffering on this planet. Why participate? Many people who suffer from egotism, which is a learned form of psychological and emotional abuse based on social conditioning, are not even aware that they're experiencing this mental condition. When they become aware that they are a perpetrator or the one being abused, they have a difficult time articulating or describing it because it is so hard to put a finger on. Therefore, resources for survivors have been made available. What can we do? Join the movement to raise social awareness about the ego. The more you understand and learn about the ego, the more you will unravel who you are. Like-minded people, organizations, and communities can help as a support system to share information on the subject with their audience through various channels such as social media, blog pages, local events, and community involvement. You can also show support by distributing our ego awareness pamphlets or wearing ego awareness wristbands, which can be made available for various events. Talk to other advocates, meetup groups, and organizations dedicated to mindfulness. Self-help empowerment, spirituality, and so forth. Organize events or incorporate messaging into existing events in order to educate your audience about egotism. Networking with others of similar orientation, whether on the internet or in person, works wonders. Allowing the space for creativity, inspiration, and ideas exchanged back and forth with each other builds a strong, united foundation. Your conscious family exists in packets throughout the world. So it's just a matter of timing and preparation for a greater shift to emerge and spread like wildfire around the globe. Let us help transform the world, one ego at a time. We look forward to your participation. Thank you.